We cross live to Cape Town and we are joined by Professor Nicholas Biekpe, who is with the University of Cape Town and the Growth Institute. Professor, welcome to our program. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you and to your listeners.
Looking at the new wave of change in Zimbabwe, when we look back, say the 1980s, when President of Tanzania, Julius Nyerere, told the incoming president then, Robert Mugabe, that, if I quote him, that you have inherited the jewel of Africa, make sure you don't soil it. Now, 37 years later, Mugabe has left the country that was regarded once as the breadbasket of Africa, now a cashless economy. Any hope for recovery?
There is hope, but it's going to be a long haul because the economy, you must remember, economic development is fairly cumulative. If you misuse your resources that were meant for future years, then you have to get a way of getting that back, and that takes time. So it's going to take time, but the time would depend on the government that is going, or the temporary government that is going to be there, and the elections that are coming next year. So it will depend on so many facets. But I think Zimbabwe could still get back to reasonable where they were some lot of decades ago, if they get the right government. And also, you must also remember that there were a lot of sanctions that were imposed on the country because of the lack of political development. So if that could be the incoming government, if they could see that the world will not invest in their country unless they open up the market, they have free and fair elections, and then concentrate on the core sectors. If they can do that, it will take time, but it's not going to be in the next 4 or 5 years. It's going to take quite a while.
Well, one would take into cognizance the fact that Robert Mugabe was not working alone. He had the intelligentsia, he had the economic advisory councils. One would take that also. He was not the jack of all trades. He had the people that he had appointed, and he surrounded himself with technocrats. But the country, just in 2013, adopted Zim Asset, which was a policy intended to revive the economy of Zimbabwe in various sectors. They only needed $11 billion to kickstart it, but it failed. Why?
It failed for a lot of reasons. As I mentioned, if you look at around the year 2000, when the land issue then started, and then the international sanctions came about. And you can have your own agenda like they had, have wonderful ideas, wonderful programs, surround yourself with people that you think can help. But if the international community, the investor community, the people who would put in the money to develop the country are not coming in, then those ideas become white elephants, if I can use the phrase. So that was always the case with Zimbabwe. If you remember, Zimbabwe is very highly literate, very, very educated in every aspect. But even that, if the conditions for investors to come in are not actually in place, again, that's not going to work. And again, I come back to the point I made earlier on when the U.S. government imposed sanctions. The condition was that they allow free and fair election. The Europeans followed. And once that happened, any investor who wanted to come to Zimbabwe and put in a lot of money was worried that they will be blacklisted and also even their assets frozen. So that was the key thing that actually put Zimbabwe. They were grappling to get
Let me come in
the
there,
currency issue become a major thing that actually crippled the economy totally.
Let me come in there. I mean, like, should we say it is an excuse that they were sanctioned in Zimbabwe one-sidedly? I mean, when the West said to Zimbabwe, we're imposing sanctions on you, Mugabe said, we don't care. We are going to adopt the look to the East policy. Why didn't it work? Yeah,
it didn't work for a number of reasons. If you look again, when the West, you know, when Mugabe started looking at China, it was out of desperation. Zimbabwe has never, even though they've got a relation with China, which is a very solid one, but the Chinese asset flow into the country was not that great. It was later on when the West blocked every channel that the Zimbabwean government saw the need to actually then look over to China for support. But again, I mean, when you get the U.S. and the EU, the largest trading partners then, imposing sanctions and whatnot, and you don't have the foresight to remember that, look, if these two big markets that are going to block access in financial flow into the country is actually going to work. I don't think he saw that as something that was going to happen. I mean, and that actually did happen. That was one thing that actually crippled the economy. But you see, the Chinese support came later on when he was very desperate. I mean, and also you mentioned surrounding himself with a lot of people. They were there, but again, if the systems are not in place, it's going to be a major issue, and that was precisely what happened.
Well, Professor, my time has ended. Thank you very much for making time to speak to us. This story is developing. Surely we'll get back to you for more analysis, but thank you for now. Professor Nicholas Biekpe coming to us live from Cape Town.